Empire at War is one of the Star Wars games released in the period many refer to as the Golden Age of LucasArts, joining earlier titles released between 2002 and 2006, like Battlefront 1 and 2, Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, and Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, as well as Jedi Knight Jedi Outcast, capitalizing on the hype surrounding Star Wars as the prequels were coming out. This period also saw a big development in the idea of Star Wars media telling interconnected stories, but while that trend was heating up, there were still plenty of instances where weird, interesting, or even contradictory lore choices were made, and today we're going to be looking at some of those in Empire at War. While the word contradictions can definitely have a negative connotation, I do want to emphasize that this isn't necessarily criticism of the choices, save for one thing which I am very salty about, which we'll definitely get to. There are plenty of reasons though why these contradictions may happen, not least of which the need for gameplay to take priority. But also things like limited information being made available from Lucasfilm for the game developers because of upcoming projects, or development being rushed for any other number of reasons. But I still think these differences in how lore is approached are interesting on their own, and it's possible to talk about what they are and why they happen, or even just share these with people who may not be familiar with the games without being weird about it. Specific stats within rosters are an example of places where lore was secondary to gameplay for a clear reason. That is what you're building the whole game around after all. For the most part, ship balancing was fairly symmetrical, making it reasonable for things like the 750-meter acclimator of the Empire to have been roughly equivalent to the 300-meter Nebulon B for the Rebels, with both being made around the same size in-game, despite their very different lore sizes. I personally think lore-wise, having the Dreadnought heavy cruiser in the game in this role could have been a better fit than the Acclimator for the Empire. It's a bit closer to the Nebulon B in size, and it's definitely a very prominent ship within the expanded universe. But the other element to consider here is that they were, of course, trying to tie in media from the prequels, making the Acclimator a lot more attractive, alongside its triangular shape fitting the factional aesthetics, matching even more Imperial triangles against the blobs that the Rebellion had for their ships, and also explaining why things like the Venator and V-Wing made it in as pirate units. Sadly, the Providence was still nowhere to be seen. There is one particular ship though which stands out more than any others as a strange choice, if only because of the context around it. Each side in the base game, before the Forces of Corruption expansion, had one ship designed specifically for the game by Petroglyph. For the Rebels, this was the Assault Frigate Mark II, which is essentially a purpose-built version of the Assault Frigate Mark I, a ship type common within the Rebellion and New Republic, which was built by modifying the old Dreadnought heavy cruiser I was just talking about. But for the Empire, their anti-fighter corvette is the Tartan Patrol Cruiser. I'm not opposed to games filling out the universe with their own content, like Battlefront did with the Victory Frigate, but the Empire could have used the anti-fighter variations of the classic Carrack, or even the dedicated Lancer frigate, although Lancers were much rarer in-universe. The reason I say this one stands out, though, is that at some point in development, the Carrack was actually supposed to be the ship in this role. Comments in the code around the Tartan say that's what it originally was, and some of the ship's sound files and even its icon refer to it as the Carrack still. If you look at the model, you can even see a lot of visual similarities to the design of the Carrack, with the engine block and the viewport areas on the Tartan being similar in principle, but changed in proportion to be a bit more, triangular. On the whole topic of ship size, the Carrack being used in this role would have actually added a bit more to that discussion as well, since at 350 meters long, which is 13,779.5 inches for our American viewers, it would be significantly larger than the Rebel CR-90, its anti-fighter counterpart, or even the Nebulon B as the next ship up in the Rebels roster, though presumably this would have just resulted in scale adjustments to match their roles like the other ships already had. The biggest adjustment here was of course when the ships had to like and subscribe for more videos on Datapad, which was difficult given their fictional spaceships. One of the most surprising lore bits about the game to me really is that it was set in the original trilogy period at all, rather than just being in the prequel era, although the big factor there was almost certainly timing. Battlefront 2 released before Empire at War by several months with more of the Revenge of the Sith designs that would have been necessary to fill out ship and vehicle rosters, and Empire at War did come out almost a year after Revenge of the Sith, but Empire at War's development seems to have been longer than the significantly more rushed Battlefront 2. Thanks to conversations I've been able to have with employees of Petroglyph, the developers of the game, I do know that the Clone Wars were actually the preferred era on LucasArts' end if future content had been pursued, whether as an expansion or as a sequel, whereas Petroglyph tended to want to work on content tied into the Knights of the Old Republic era instead, which has its own interesting lore implications. The End of Forces of Corruption's campaign actually has one of the biggest hanging threads of Legends, where the Night Sister Silri takes data found on the under construction Eclipse Superstar Destroyer and finds a Sith army from Revan's era frozen in carbonite. The plans would have been that mothballed ships from the KOTOR period would have been combined with those soldiers to make an army around 30 years after Endor. This is, funnily enough, not that far off in principle from some other stories told around the same time, where the Lost Tribe of the Sith, which is basically what it says on the tin, and some other Sith artifacts like the Sith Meditation Sphere, helpfully named Ship, used by Ben Skywalker in the Legacy of the Force books, play a big role. Depending on how exactly this was executed, there's actually a 5-year gap after the Yuuzhan Vong War, a galaxy-spanning conflict which nearly wiped out the New Republic, now called the Galactic Alliance, not to mention the Jedi, where a smaller scope war like this could actually fit in as a threat to an already damaged galaxy. This might even have involved Revan himself being brought forward in the timeline depending on what the Old Republic had done. And yes, I did say the information about that army was stolen from the Eclipse, which is another bit of lore in the game with some weird implications. The final battle of the Zan Consortium campaign, which is actually my favorite mission of any of the faction's campaigns, involves a 3-way battle between the Rebels, the Empire, and the player's faction, the piratical Zan Consortium, over the planet Kuat, a major shipyard for the Empire. During the battle, your main objective is to board the Eclipse, meaning the Rebels under the command of General Han Solo get a good look at it too. Given the whole campaign is about Tiber Zahn, leader of the Zan Consortium, tracking down information that leads up to this, I don't think that part of it is very weird, but this battle means that Han and the Rebellion had to know about the Eclipse, and that it was unaccounted for afterwards. Han is even around to see it use its super laser, so it seems like a pretty big deal to lose sight of. The New Republic is surprised by its capabilities when it shows up in the Dark Empire comics, set several years later, leading the forces of the Reborn Emperor, so Han's probably got some explaining to do there. There's another bit of lore in the same "they knew about this way too early" theme tied to a planet, this time Wayland. Having planets be present on the galactic map, especially in sandbox modes like Galactic Conquest, are clearly just for gameplay, even if they show up in the campaign if there's not a mission around them. But in the Rebel campaign, one of the first Rebel missions takes you to Wayland, a planet which even the text in-game refers to as not being on any charts. This mission has the Rebels go to the planet so R2 can take some codes from an Imperial network uplink, but they really shouldn't know the planet exists at all. It's not even a planet the Imperials would commonly know about. Considering its introduction in the Thrawn trilogy, had the Imperial Grand Admiral Thrawn's attempts to find the planet be a major plot point, since the planet was home to a bunch of hidden technology that Thrawn was hoping to take advantage of. For the most part, while the Consortium campaign in Forces of Corruption can probably be taken as an attempt to build on and within the lore of the Star Wars universe, the base game campaigns for the Rebels and Empire function more as vignettes with the characters and locations and serve as more of a free-form tutorial. You have some major event recreations like the Battle of Yavin, including an Imperial alternate history version where the Empire wins, but you also have some other fun, if not especially canon-friendly missions. Generally, these involve Han Solo being in pretty direct contact with Rebel leadership and being involved in a lot of Rebel activities. There's a prison break that he incites on Kashyyyk that the Rebellion decides to back him up during. There's also a mission where the Rebels enlist Han's help to track down Tarkin's research base for the Death Star in payment for a prior situation where Han was rescued by the Rebellion from an Imperial Star Destroyer. It kind of feels like half of the Rebel campaign is about doing stuff with Han for the Rebellion. This is mostly just because hero-based missions made for the best gameplay, but you have Kyle Katarn right there, not just in lore, but literally in the game. Sadly, he's only ever used in skirmish, much like Mara Jade is for the Empire, but he would have been perfect for these kinds of commando missions. The final bit of weird lore we'll be talking about today is the one I alluded to being the most unforgivable at the start of the video, and it's really more of a missed opportunity to add something great to the universe than a discrepancy. Several planets in the game have local militia units of different species, like Twi'leks on Ryloth, Celestians on Sullust, and Hutts on Nal Hutta. There's also a whole lot of humans throughout the galaxy. One planet, Polis, almost had a new species type introduced by the game. This new species, the Pingani, ended up just being humans in Arctic gear, but a cut model in the game's files shows them much cooler intent. They were going to be penguins. The species actually does get mentioned in some other places, most notably the Darth Bane trilogy, where there's a Pingani Jedi Master who I love to bring up at every opportunity named Anno Wen-Chi. though sadly Petroglyph didn't commit, so instead of having a penguin Jedi Master, we had another human. That's going to do it for our look at some of the weirder lore behind Empire at War, though. In the future, I'd like to take a look at how some other following sources use things introduced by games like Empire at War and Battlefront 2 as a kind of flip side of these videos. But again, this video isn't meant as some kind of attack on Empire at War, it's just because I find this kind of thing interesting, so I hope you've enjoyed. If so, remember to leave a like and subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time.